What's up, football world? It is Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show, and we're coming to you live from the Combine in Indianapolis, and really excited about the things that took place in day one today. Today was all about the front seven. It was about the defensive line and linebackers working out in front of scouts, coaches, general managers, and executives. And I got to say, and talking to a NFL head coach coming over, he talked about this draft being exciting because it was a front seven draft that if you need a edge players, linebackers, and those things, you would be able to find them. And I think based on what we saw happen at Lucas Oil Stadium, it was everything that it was supposed to be. You saw edge runners, edge defenders running fast. You saw big bodies moving around. And you saw linebackers who showed the versatility that you want in today's game. And what I want to do is I'm going to go through some guys that stood out to me. I'm going to play the hits. I'm going to talk about the notable names, the guys that we've talked about in mock drafts. And then next week, when we are able to digest all the information, relook at some of the performances, and put it together. Then we talk about some of the gems and the sleepers that have really helped themselves with the way that they performed over this 4-day event. But let's start out with the defense line, and we'll go in order in terms of the way that they worked out here. It was defensive tackles, then it was edge rushers, and then it was linebackers. And I'm going to tell you, the star of the defensive tackle group is the person that we thought would be the star of it based on how he performed at the Senior Bowl and how he walks around on the daily basis. And that's Caleb Banks from Florida. And the reason Caleb Banks is so interesting because he's 6'6, 327 pounds, 35-inch arms, 10 and 7/8 inch hand size. And then when you look at the numbers that he put up, 504, 40, 32-inch vertical jump, 9'6 broad jump, that is just a freak athlete with prototypical dimensions. Now, when you go back and you watch him play at Florida, 2024 was a better tape than 2025. Injuries prematurely cut short his final season, but you could see the flashes. And as an evaluator, you are supposed to grade the flashes, meaning the best moments of their performance, because if they show it on tape once or twice, it means that they certainly can do it again, but it's on the coaches and the staff to put them in a scheme that allows them to do that. Well, in Caleb Banks, you had an opportunity to see that all of the tools are there for this guy to be a really effective pro prospect. In fact, I would say the tools are there that we can lock him into the first round because he is going to come off the board within the first 32 selections, given his size, given his stature, given his physical ability, and the talent that he's displayed, not only here, but also at the Senior Bowl. And a lot of people are going to be excited about the combine. And you're going to hear the detractors talk about underwear Olympics and how these guys will run around and how it doesn't translate. Yes, the combine should be kept in perspective. It is an event that is more of a track meet than a football event, but there are some things that translate and allow coaches and executives, evaluators to be able to say, hey, if he's able to do this in this environment, it is going to lead to success at the next level in certain capacities. When I look at Caleb Banks, the length, the explosiveness, the quickness, all of that translates. And then you go back and you look at his tape and particularly his performance at times at the Senior Bowl. There's a lot to get excited about what he brings to table. And I can understand why he would be one of the names that's buzzing coming out the combine. You just don't see people with this size, this talented, have the kind of things that he has. That's why I can lock in that he's going to come off the board within the first 32 selections. After the defensive tackles work, it was all about the edge rushers. And edge rushers have been kind of the position that we talked about. This could be a run where we have 8 guys going the first round that come off the edges that are primarily pass rushers that make their money being able to knock quarterbacks down. When we started this process, look, the guy that everyone had talked about, um, Arvell Reese. And the reason Arvell Reese is much discussed is because in the league, everyone is chasing what I call the ghost of Michael Parsons. Michael Parsons was a 12th round pick when he came, was the 12th overall pick when he came out. People didn't know that he would be able to be an all pro player that could do it as an off ball linebacker and as an edge defender. Well, Arvell Reese has traits that kind of make scouts envision him playing that role. When you watched him play at Ohio State, you saw someone who was a off-ball linebacker who could run around and chase on early downs. He could get on the edge on third downs. He could make plays not only against the run, but as a pass rusher. and you loved all that. But what you wanted to see here, as someone who is a 1 year starter, someone who is just beginning to kind of find his way, how explosive of an athlete are we talking about? And what kind of tools is he bringing to the table that a coach can take and really help him become a dominant player? Well, you talk about a 6'4", 241-pound athlete, 32-inch arms, 9.5-inch hand, 40 time, 4.46. When you just use that, none of the other stuff, vertical jump, broad jump, whatever that comes in at, it don't matter. But when you put down a 4.46 at that size, showing the things that he's shown as an off-ball linebacker, edge defender, a hybrid, there are going to be a lot of teams that talk about him being the next Michael Parsons playmaker. Now, the thing that I love about what I was able to see, not only in the 40, but watching him go through drills, easy to determine that he's an A-plus athlete. He has all that. He's smooth, fluid. He's explosive. He has the dynamic playmaking ability that you want to see when you look at the tape. You also see those same dynamic traits when you watch him move around on the turf. And as you're beginning to figure out what can we do with him, you want to look at the movement drills to see, hey, is he truly a linebacker? Is he better suited to be an edge defender? Does he have those special athletic traits to do more? Well, without question, he has those traits to be able to do more. Now the decision comes down to when you interview him and you talk to him and you get a better feel for his aptitude, you get a better feel for what he knows. You talk to Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator, and the defensive coaches at Ohio State. You begin to get a feel for how much can you put on his plate. And when you put a lot on his plate, will he still be able to be an effective player? Based on how he moves around, there's no doubt he can play the unicorn role. But the next step for him to solidify himself, maybe as the number 2 overall pick to the New York Jets or a top 4 pick to the Tennessee Titans, the next part for him is how does he handle the meetings? Now, he had the formal interviews with the teams here, but now when we talk about the team visits, the pro day, when he really sits down and talks to the defensive coaches, can they figure out a plan for him that allows him to be the special player that many envision based on the measurables, based on the tape, and just based on the conversations that we've had with Ohio State coaches? He's special. And I think those special qualities showed up in this event on Thursday night. The next player that you have to talk about when it comes to edge rushers, David Bailey from Texas Tech. Coming into this event, he's a guy that everyone has celebrated as potentially the number 1 pass rusher off the board. When you saw him this year at Texas Tech, 14 and a half sacks, 3 years at Stanford, he had 14 and a half sacks on top of that. So he comes in with a long track record of production. But what you didn't know is, man, how fast is he? What does he look like as an athlete? Can he put some size on? Where he measures in at 6'4", 251 pounds, 33-inch arms, 10 and a quarter hand size. So you like the length, you like the size, and physically when you watched him, it looks like he's been putting in work in preparation for the combine. So you love those traits. When you look at the measurable numbers, 40 time 4.50, I would tell you that's the official time. On the stopwatch, that's going to come in the 4.4s, 4.45, 4.48. So that's super fast for an edge rusher. Vertical jump, broad jump, both matches the explosiveness that you saw on the 40 time. 35-inch vertical, 10.9 broad jump, dynamic, fluid. In fact, he's probably more fluid an athlete than I anticipated based on the tape. In my notes, I wrote down, I felt like he was a little robotic when he would go through his pass rush maneuvers, but the athlete that I saw at the combine was someone who was smooth, fluid. He worked well in space. He had the speed and quickness that you knew and the first step quickness that you love, but all of the packaging in terms of the way that he moves, going through bags, doing the positional drills, he really solidified himself as a guy who has the ability to be not only a blue chip player, but an immediate impact player as an edge rusher. And it's also interesting that on the day that he works out, it's the same day that the New York Jets decided to trade away Jermaine Johnson. They go get Tavondre Sweat, an interior player. So there's a void on the exterior. Could mean we're talking about Arvell Reese or David Bailey filling those voids when it comes down to it when we get to the draft. After that, when we talk about edge rushers, the guy who had a lot of intrigue coming in, and some of the questions were going to be about the length that he has, when it comes to his arm side, and that's going to be Cashius Howell, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. 6'2", 253 pounds, but he only has 30 and 1/4 inch arms. Now, to put some perspective in that, there only been two guys who have been in the first round who've had an arm length of that size or shorter. One was David Pollock, and that's a little concerning, and that'll make uh, evaluators pause before saying, like, hey, man, let's lock him in. But after they watch Cassius Howell move around, I think we're pretty confident that he's going to be a first round pick because 4'5", 40, 32.5 inch vertical jump, 9'7" broad jump. And I know people are looking at that 40 time and they're like, well, look, you just went crazy over Arvell Reese's 4.46, David Bailey's 4.50. This is a little slower. Some would say significantly slower than those guys. Why are you so excited? Were you excited about Cassius Howell because his 10-yard split, which really correlates to success as a pass rusher, 1.58 seconds. That's the fastest among all the edge rushers in this draft. So even though Arvell Reese ran 4.46, Cassius Howell matches him in that 10 time. So that first step quickness, that initial burst, that snap count anticipation, the things that pass rushers, elite pass rushers have, he has that. So we can talk about the arm length, we can talk about the 40 time, all that, but that first step quickness, that time is going to convince coaches that, hey, he can get it done. And we were having conversations about getting after the passer and what works and what translates. We know the 10-yard split time translates because Cassius Howell has not only put sacks on tape, but because he put that time on the paper, yeah, he's in. He's in the first round. And how people fit him in or slot him in as a 3-4 player, a 3-4 edge defender, could determine how high he goes. But right now, I think, look, he's guaranteed to be within the first 32, maybe within the first 20 picks based on how he performed at this event. Now, let me bring up two names that haven't been talked about, but will begin to get some buzz. One is TJ Parker from Clemson. TJ Parker was expected to be a top pick entering the season in preseason. People at Clemson raved about him, thought that he would be a guy that would be a double-digit sack artist. For whatever reason, it didn't work. It didn't work for him, didn't work for Peter Woods. It didn't work for a lot of guys on Clemson on either side of the ball. So that buzz had kind of fallen by the wayside. Well, in looking at him, 6'4", 263, 33-inch arms, 40 time is 4.68, not great, but a split, 161. That puts him in the top 10 of edge rushers in this draft class. The quickness, the burst, the fact that he had 11 sacks in 2024, now you begin to think, oh, okay, had a bad final season, but it doesn't mean that he can't get back on track as a pro. When you throw in the 34-inch vertical, you throw in a 10-foot broad jump, you're talking about an explosive athlete, someone who has first step quickness, someone who has proven that he can get to the quarterback and put up double-digit sacks. We've talked about him being a fringe first round player. It'll be interesting now from picks 25 to 40. Where does TJ Parker fall? I think he helped himself based on how he performed in Indianapolis. Would it be in the combine? You talk about workout warriors and guys that you love to see uh, kind of open our eyes in terms of their athleticism, and it makes us go back to the tape to really determine what are they as players. Malachi Lawrence from Central Florida is one of those guys that's going to send scouts scurrying back to the film room to see, man, did we miss something when we evaluated him in the middle of the season? And the reason why they're going to do that is because the dimensions that we talk about in terms of being an effective pass rusher, he checks off all the boxes. 6'4", 253, 33 and 5/8 inch arms, 9 1/4 hands. So he has long levers. He has those prototypical traits that you look for in an edge defender. 40 time, 4.52. Love it. Vertical jump, 40 inches. Broad jump, 10-10. As an evaluator, former scout, did this for a long time. Watched pass rushers, played with a bunch of high-level pass rushers. Look, talk about Reggie White and Derek Thomas, Bruce Smith, saw Julius Peppers when got drafted when I was at the Carolina Panthers. All those things. There's some things that you have to have. Malachi Lawrence is not in that category, so I don't want to get that fooled. But I will say height, weight, speed as a prospect, man, he checks off a lot of things. And in fact, it reminds me a lot of Josh Sweat, who played for the Philadelphia Eagles for a few years before. I think he's now down with the Arizona Cardinals. When you throw in these kinds of measurements and these kind of athletic dimensions, and you factor the fact that he has 20 sacks, three forced fumbles, and 4 seasons at Central Florida, now you begin to talk about, okay, maybe he's a day two guy that we can target. Pick someone else, another position early, circle back around, and maybe Malachi Lawrence is someone that you can get in that range that works for your team in the second or third round. Malachi Lawrence from Central Florida, he is one of the winners of the combine because the numbers that he put up certainly makes evaluators go back to the tape. And when you look at the tape, you find someone who is very, very productive as a pass rusher. Now let's move to the linebackers. And the reason the linebackers are fascinated and talking to an NFL head coach, he talked about this draft being so deep at inside linebacker that you feel like you can get a starter day one, day two that can impact your team. Sonny Styles was already going to be in the conversation as a top 10 pick, but he wasn't firmly penciled in as a top 10 pick. After the performance on Thursday night, yeah, he's locked in as a top 10 pick. And the reason why is just he is so long. The comparisons people have made, Fred Warner from the San Francisco 49ers. But I'm going to be honest with you, he is a more explosive and more dynamic athlete than Fred Warner. 6'5, 244 pounds, 4'4", 40 time, 43 and a half inch vertical jump, 11'2" broad jump. That 10-yard split that I talked about being effective and predictive for pass rushers, well, as an off-ball linebacker, he put a 156 up. One of the fastest that you're gonna find for an athlete. He has that explosive, electric, versatile. When you watch the tape, he can kind of bounce around in any of those linebacker positions. Even if you want to, he is athletic enough to slide out in the slot in your base defense and handle some of those slot receivers. Because of that, and because of these athletic traits, you're talking about someone that is a day one blue chip player, someone that can impact the defense. More importantly, someone that maybe you build your defense around when you slot him in as your starting inside linebacker. Because of the overall juice that he brings to the table, his combine performance just solidified that, hey, he's going to be a top 10 pick. Now it's about trying to figure out where does he go and how can they use him. You just don't find guys with this kind of size, this kind of length, this kind of frame often in the draft. And because he's so dynamic and explosive, we certainly going to have to talk about Sonny Styles being a top 10 pick. I want to go after him and I want to talk about someone that kind of falls up under the radar, but he shouldn't because he's such a good player and he's been a really good player at the University of Texas, and that's Anthony Hill Jr. Anthony Hill is look, a kid that is all around it. He makes plays. He makes plays in a variety of ways. He has some splash ability, but I think people had underrated his athleticism. That won't happen again after you look at his combine performance 6'2, 238, 4.51, 40 time, 37-inch vertical, 10, and a 10.5 broad jump. And that 10-yard split is right behind Sonny Styles at 158. People talk about Styles and how you have to have that kind of player as a impact player. And we're talking about Styles being a top 10 pick. And Anthony Hill, you're talking about a top of the second round, middle of the second round player, but the speed, the athleticism is there. And when I talk to coaches, they talk about big, fast, physical. Some have made the comparison to Bobby Wagner. You saw Bobby Wagner, a second round pick at Utah State, have a lot of success with the Seattle Seahawks, continuing to have that kind of success with the Washington Commanders. Anthony Hill is really, really intriguing. I loved the tape before I even got to Indianapolis, but after watching the athlete perform, I am more convinced that he has an opportunity to be a high-end player, someone that you find in day two, but man, he might give you day one production because the talent, the tools certainly could equate to great production at the next level. Speaking of production, there weren't many linebackers that were more productive than Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech. But there was this narrative that surrounded him that, hey, he's a good college player. He does all the things, has great instincts and awareness and diagnostic skills, but he can't be the type of guy that athletically can hold up. Well, He proved that maybe as an athlete, we were sleeping on the kid from Texas Tech. And the reason why 4.57 40 won't wow people, but man, that's plenty fast enough for linebacker position. 38-inch vertical jump, 38 and a half to be exact, 10-1 broad jump, three cone time, sub 7, 6.90 for that. Fast enough, explosive enough. Then when you look at the tape, you like the instincts, the awareness, the nose for the ball where he's always around the action. We have found really a lot of linebackers that have come from the second round that have been able to have success. And that success is about instincts, awareness, toughness, being able to kind of play faster than your 40 time because you're on top of it. Well, in Rodriguez, we're talking about someone who is super explosive and plays with bad intentions while also having a knack for the ball. Last year, Carson Swessinger from the Cleveland Browns, former walk-on, UCLA, had been slept on through most of the process. They take him. He has immediate success. I'm not saying that Jacob Rodriguez can match his success, but what I am saying is as people begin to dig into the tape and they look at these numbers, there's going to be some confidence that he can come in and play right away. And not only play right away, but excel right away in a role that should put him in a starting position probably from the first time he walks in the building. Jacob Rodriguez certainly helped himself with the way that he got down doing the positional workouts. And then when you think about the athletic testing, man, I am more excited than ever about this linebacker class. Last guy I'm going to talk about, and I talked about him a little bit going into it. If you watched any of the stuff on NFL Network, Jake Golday from Cincinnati was someone that I was really intrigued with. And I was intrigued just because, man, you just don't find guys at this size who can do some of the things that he did throughout his time in Cincinnati. When I looked at him, 6'4.5", 239 pounds. He ran a 4.62 40, plenty fast enough. Vertical jump 39, broad jump 10.5. Short shuttle was 4.34, which is fast enough. But the thing about Jake Golday that stands out and is impressive is the versatility that he brings. This is a true off-ball linebacker who also has experience putting his hand in the dirt. As we talk about people chasing those hybrids, he is that new front seven hybrid that everyone wants. You can move him around, you can put him in a few different spots. Loved who he was coming in. He obviously was in my top five at five, but the athleticism, the length, watching him move around on the turf, Jake Dolday is going to be one of those guys that people talk about as we get closer to the draft, being a guy that you're confident that, look, the second day of the draft, I need an inside linebacker that can make it happen. Jake Golday certainly should be that guy. Um, those are 10 guys that caught my eye, 10 guys that I'm very impressed with the way that they kind of came and took care of their business on day one of the combine. But I got to tell you, the next few days are going to have some interesting performances, particularly when you have an opportunity to see these two groups that are going to take place on Friday. Corners are going, safeties are going, tight ends are going. And when I look at that group, man, tight end group, loaded. A lot of good players, and those players are going to kind of separate themselves from the pack when they work out on Friday. And then at cornerback, a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty, but there's some really intriguing athletes who are expected to put on a show as we talk about this track meet that is the NFL Combine. That was day one. That was my wrap up. I'm Bucky Brooks. Thanks for coming into the Bucky Brooks Show. Let me send a shout out to FanDuel Sportsbook for all the cool things that they're doing with the podcast. Maybe tomorrow night, if I have a little time after this all said and done, we'll talk about some of the best prospects that are getting it done. DBs, tight ends, they're up on tap. And I will talk about them next time on the Bucky Brooks Show. Come back, listen to me. We got all your NFL draft coverage right here, keeping it locked.